thank you for joining us on another episode of The Family Business, where I'm proud to introduce someone I've known for 20 years, Andre Bessette. Andre, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here today.
Good. I want to do this a little differently. I want to make sure that while we cover the excitement that is your life and the adventure that it's been, I want to make sure that we get to know Eclipse and the technology and SBS and the other points about this, because this is a message that's going to make a difference for patients and physicians around the world. And so we're going to weave in and out of personal and professional and make sure that we get all the information we can out of you to make sure that we understand everything is, because the first thing that captured my attention when I looked through this is you can do that. And so I'd like to start there. Can you give a bit of a, I guess, an overview of SBS and then the idea generation of how this all came to be? Because I think it's through bone lengthening and skin expansion that this kind of turned into something. So I'd love to hear a bit of the story, and then we can get into where you are on your timeline and talk about the technology and the indication.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think you're right when you say, how do you do that? Seems crazy, but the behind Eclipse is just the simple idea of applying a force to human tissue. And it does go back to, like you mentioned, bone lengthening, and also breast implant pocket expanders. And those devices just put a little bit of a stretch force on tissue, whether it's bone or skin, and you can stimulate the body to grow. It's called mechanotransduction, where the body actually responds to this mechanical force. And so go back a few years, my co-founder and the inventor of the Eclipse technology, Dr. James Dunn, he is a pediatric surgeon. And at times in pediatrics, babies are born and they may have an acquired or congenital defect in their small intestine, and it will die and needs to be removed. And Dr. Dunn, being the surgeon, was the one that had to perform that surgery and then hand this baby back to these parents and say, this is all I can do. I'm sorry, I can't fix. I can only, support. And he felt that was not right, and he wanted to make a difference. And so he saw his colleagues in orthopedics lengthening bones. He saw, his colleagues in plastic surgery, reconstructing tissue pockets. And he thought, well, why can't I do this to small intestine? And so, back in the early 2000s, he started out on this, and he came up with a little screw and a nut idea, and he put it into a rat model, and he basically showed you could lengthen intestine. And so from there, it, a number of years later and a number of studies, and moving from the small animal to large animal, and he showed that it can happen. And I think it's fascinating to see, and now where we are today, even in the clinic, lengthening and stimulating the body to regenerate and regrow healthy small intestine is a fascinating thing, and excited to talk about it today.
Well, to me, I have two kids of my own. I know you have two of yours, and there's nothing just more depressing and disappointing than when you find out that your child has some affliction that they can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's just deflating. And so to hear that there is some kind of progress in something like this, where now all these families, they have hope. And I don't know, to me, I can't think of anything that's more of a gift than giving them the opportunity for something to be done. When you look at, his background, Dr. Dunn, I looked at his education, and he's at Stanford. He is a luminary. So I wouldn't mind you if you could give me a bit of a background of how you all got to know each other, and some of the history there, because how do you get connected to somebody like that?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's a pretty good story. So go back a few years. I had started working on a company called Peak Surgical, and we were involved with Stanford. It was a spin-out technology out of Stanford, and I got connected with Dr. Tom Crummell. He became our chair of our scientific advisory board, and at the time he was chief of surgery at Stanford. And that was back in 2006. And so Tom and I stayed together working on different companies and different projects over the years. And fast forward to, I think it was about end of 2017, beginning of 2018. I was working with Tom and Mark Blumenkrantz, also from Stanford, working on some medical device stuff. And I came across Dr. Dunn's work down at UCLA. And it blew my mind when I saw what he was doing. I was like, wow, this is incredible. He's, got a mechanical device that regenerates tissue, and he's showing success in the large animal model. And he had all this peer-reviewed published science and research, and it was so fascinating. And I was puzzled. I was like, why hasn't this been spun out? Why hasn't this become a company, and why isn't this in the clinic yet? And so got connected with Dr. Dunn. And then at the same time, I found out he was actually moving up to Northern California to take over for Tom Crummell as chief of surgery over at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital. And so really it was the right place at the right time, and then getting the right people together, that this all happened. And literally the next week, the three of us were sitting around a table and said, we got to do this. We got to do this for the kids, and we got to get this, into the clinic, and really help these families that, I think you mentioned it earlier, these families and these patients, they have no choice. There is no solution to short bowel syndrome. And all solutions today are just supportive in nature. There's ways to provide nutrition and nutrients through total parenteral nutrition, but those aren't curative. Those are just, they support and keep them alive. And so a lot of these patients will have a lifetime course of having to deal with this condition, being connected to a feeding tube and being connected with a central line, and to give, parents and these patients and kids a better chance at life and a better quality of life. And in some cases, the mortality rates are pretty high. So allowing them to survive and thrive really was our goal. And so getting together with these two amazing, pediatric surgeons, and like you mentioned, Dr. Dunn's background, being an engineer and also a surgeon, just made so much sense to me. Great people working together on a great mission.
So I'd love to understand the mechanics a bit of the technology itself in the system. Do you refer to it as a coil or a spring?
Yeah, we call it a coil. It
Okay.
looks like a spring. It's made out of nitinol, so it's a memory-shaped metal. And yeah, to dive into it, what we're doing actually is taking this coil in a compressed state. So we compress it because its free state is an expanded state, and we place that inside the small intestine. And what we do is we apply some external plication sutures, or a way to really reduce the lumen of the intestine to give the coil something to push against. So then we place it inside the intestine. We then release it, and what it does is it just applies a very, very light distraction force on that tissue, and gradually starts to stretch it, or put into this mechanical force, and that's what stimulates the growth. Then eventually, what happens is we use chromic gut suture to hold it, to create these plications. Those chromic gut sutures, that's dissolvable, it releases, and then the actual coil actually will pass out of the entire GI tract via the stool. And so the implant does not stay in the body. It does its work and then leaves, and leaves behind normal, healthy, fully functional small intestine tissue.
So for those of us that are relatively lay people at this kind of situation, if I'm understanding you correctly, the lengthening of the small intestine, or that space of the small intestine, if I read your stuff right, it's 2 to 3 times longer than what it was. I mean, that's astounding, right, that it's able to double or triple in size. And then it starts working in a healthy way to absorb nutrients and such. Now, one of the areas that I was curious about is, how many times can you do this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, right as of now, we do see that, one device can, like you said, expand 2 to 3 times its original length. But each device is limited because the contours and twists and turns of the intestine doesn't allow you to have an infinitely long device. So each one stimulates about 3 to 4 centimeters of new healthy small intestine. So we do know that we will need to have a series of treatments or a series of devices to stimulate enough lengthening to allow a patient to come off of total parenteral nutrition. So, for example, a baby is born and typically it has about 200 centimeters of healthy small intestine. after these congenital or acquired defect, they lose that. It can be cut down to as small as 25 centimeters left, or even smaller. And so this area of working that we have is quite small, but again, we look to be able to stimulate that through multiple treatments over a course of treatment. So it's not one and done. It will take a series of treatments to bring them back to a certain length that will allow them to. The goal is to absorb nutrients naturally from the food that they eat.
I mean, if you think about that and extrapolate that out, it's not just that simply that they can absorb nutrients. It affects their growth. It affects their development, probably cognitively as well as physically.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it affects them emotionally in the way that their body is reacting. And I mean, there's so many extensions of this. It's not just the nutrients piece. It's their entire lifestyle. I mean, it's
Yeah.
an extraordinary impact. How large would you say the patient population is?
So short bowel syndrome is a rare disease state or condition. So there are less than 8,000 new cases in the United States each year. But it is here, and it impacts daily lives and impacts a lot of families. And so there are, let's say on the pediatric side, these new cases that happen, but there's also adult onset, so there are patients older in life that become short gut from various conditions, trauma, so accident victims, Crohn's disease. Chronic Crohn's disease can lead to someone having a series of resection surgeries and being not left with enough. So there's a number of reasons for adults and actually also pediatrics. But again, I think it's really seeing what they have to go through and being able to give them a better quality of life. Like you mentioned, for these babies that are born, they suffer a lot of developmental problems, not being able to absorb nutrients, being stuck on total parenteral nutrition, which has a lot of side effects on it. And also, socially too. So you imagine a little kid that has to go off to school, first day of school, and he has a backpack with a feeding tube. And, the other kids look at him like, what is that? And teachers don't know how to handle that either.
Yep.
And so there's a whole world of support that has to go into supporting these children and patients as they enter into the world. And then as they go through life, even traveling, think about getting on an airplane when you are dependent upon external nutrition and all the equipment and the catheters and the tubes and the packaging you have to bring with you. It's really daunting sometimes for these patients. So to give them a chance, a better chance at life and better quality of life, I think is the mission, and we hope to provide that for them.
Yeah, one of the truisms that I came across when I first started doing this is you can talk about the percentage of people that have something and it's just a number. But when it's in their house, it's 100% of their home has this. And it's not just the person, their whole family is supporting this. I mean, this is it's a group effort, I'm sure. When you're a parent and you're maybe even a first-time parent, so now you're dealing with not only the first time having a child, but your first time is rough sledding. So it's what we all strive for in medical devices, which to have an impact that's going to benefit a patient, and you're able to do that. I mean, it's really an extraordinary story, and I love the fact that there's some serendipity here where you didn't know that he was moving up, and now it's the same connection of people that you're close with. I mean, how surreal is that? Where are you at with your clinicals at this point?
Yeah, no, that's excited to tell you about that. Yeah, we just recently was able to treat the first human ever. So we treated the first patient at Stanford back in March, and happy to report that that patient is now 7 months out, almost 8 months out now, and doing really well. Everything went to the plan. All the primary and secondary outcomes of this first in human clinical study were achieved. So that was really fascinating to see. It's such a relief, right, when the first one goes well. Since then, we've actually just enrolled and treated our second patient just recently at Stanford.
Oh, really?
So
Awesome.
yeah, just the other day, about 2 weeks ago. And so yeah, doing so far so good, doing really well. But again, we're looking to continue to enroll in the study, and happy to be finally in the clinic. And Dr. Dunn kind of put it into context for me where, I said, wow, it took us, almost 4 years to get to this point where we're treating a human. And he said, "Nuh-uh, it took me 24 years to get to this point." And I said, "Oh, yes, you're right. I get it." Put
Yeah,
it in context.
it's a 24-year overnight sensation.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
so
But excited to be there.
yeah, well, I mean, look what you're doing. I mean, this is changing the way a treatment that, forgetting about previously not existing, there were no other options, and now there is a choice. The physician that did the procedures, it was it the same doctor?
So the PI, or the primary investigator on the trial at Stanford, his name is Dr. Joseph Forrester. He's actually an adult trauma surgeon, and so these patients that we had to treat first are adult short bowel patients that were coming in for another major surgical procedure, and we were placing our device at time of that procedure. And so, yeah, he's been great. These are patients that um, needed to be had another condition that needed to be addressed, and we were able to place our device at the same time.
It's great. I mean, look, I would imagine in most cases, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're the PI, usually you got to kind of step up and put your money where your mouth is, and be the first person to jump in. Is that the norm that you found, that the PI does the first in human procedure, or not always?
Yeah, so it is a big step up, and it was a big ask. The great thing about Dr. Forrester, he's right at Stanford. Dr. Dunn is right at Stanford, so Dr. Dunn was able to assist and guide and be part of it. It wasn't his patient, so he didn't do the first procedure himself, but he was definitely part of the process. And so I think just the collaborative nature at Stanford, and their willingness to step up and support a first in human procedure that's never been done before, I think was really great, and really appreciate the environment at Stanford, which is supportive of that.
Yep. And so what has the reaction been from the pediatric surgery community? I know you've had some publications. I mean, there's definitely people talking about this, but I'm curious, like what's the result of this? And as people begin to get aware of what you all have accomplished thus far.
Yeah, the pediatric surgeon world is a pretty tight knit, close network of people, and they've been following James's work, for years. Like I mentioned, he's been publishing and podium presenting over many years now, all his science and research, and so the community knows the story and has been looking forward to it. And now that we're here, I think there's an excitement level of, wow, hey, I saw this in the preclinical and all the science, and now you're showing me, human results. They all really appreciate that, and they're excited about it. And we've even been able to have partners join us from Boston Children's and Cincinnati Children's hospitals to become the next centers to be part of this study for the pediatric patient population. So really excited to see them come on board, and we've started the processes at both institutions to get the study and the protocol approved, and really get ready to move into the really the patient population that we think is going to have the greatest clinical impact, and then also economic impact. I think one of the things we didn't cover or talk about was, you mentioned the families and support that goes into taking care of these patients, but also the economic costs, the medical costs that these poor patients have to endure. On average, the first year alone, it's about $500,000 just to support a short bowel syndrome patient, and over the next 5 years, it can be upwards of $1.6 million. So huge, daily, yearly, annual cost per patient, and that actually falls also on the families. And unfortunately, going home and having to support and take care of a short bowel syndrome patient is extremely expensive. And a lot of these, patients and caregivers and families are under a lot of stress. And so, being able to help them, both clinically and, again, also economically, is part of our mission.
One of the few things about the medical community that when I first started doing this 20 plus years ago, that was disappointing, because I, been in this forever and love it like you do, was that there wasn't as much of a focus on pediatric innovation. They would, I think the term is jerry rig an adult
Yeah.
device and make it work. I'm like, I don't understand. And now that I'm older and a little wiser, I get the business side of it and the patient population, and the companies need to be able to stay in business. So I understand it. But I love when I see something that's a pediatric advancement in technology. So I'm curious from your standpoint, is that something that was harder because it's pediatric, or because the patient population, as you mentioned, is not real big, or maybe I'm not noticing that it's changed and now pediatrics are getting more focus, more investment, more attention?
Yeah, I mean, pediatrics has been, it is an underserved patient population. It's definitely been, there hasn't been a lot of innovation. There hasn't been a lot of investment over the years. It's been viewed as a small, a small business opportunity, which I feel is incorrect. And, but I think over the past years, there's been a big push for pediatric innovation, and even all the way up to the FDA. They've have a lot of programs and even grant money support. So the Pediatric Device Consortium, they're putting out funding and money to support early stage pediatric device innovation. And so, they know, and all the way up to the FDA, they know there's a need. They know there's an huge unmet clinical need. And, as an industry, we're trying to match that up with, being a viable business model, being an enticing investment for venture capital. And I think it takes creative thinking. It takes like-minded investors and innovators, people that are interested in a mission. But I think those that can see it can see how positive it can be, both clinically for these patients and also economically for the healthcare system and for the business. It's very viable.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, I've known Andre for legitimately 20 years. I looked at my notes before we came on, and it's been 20 years of us speaking. And I could tell you just from an individual, I mean, he's a dad, and in the way he looks at this type of procedure, it's not just a business idea to him. This is personal. So I'm curious about, because you've had choices of different indications to go into, different things you could have done, and yet you chose this. So I'm curious your thought process on this and how you came about going into this, because I mean, you're certainly probably easier paths, I would think. This has not been
Yeah,
a
for sure.
this has not been super linear. So talk to me a bit
Yeah.
about the decision to jump into this when you probably had other choices.
Yeah, no, it's a really great point to chat about. Yeah, so I've been in a number of different medical specialties. I've been in big companies, small companies, publicly traded companies over the years. Done early stage, later stage, and I just found that at this point in my career, in my life, that I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to make something that really changes lives. And I spent a lot of time kind of searching around and looking and kind of figuring out what could that be. And I think, like we discussed earlier, it just ended up being the right place at the right time with the right people. And I mean, I may look at the order of that too, and change that. It may be the right people, might be the first thing I was looking. I've always wanted to, stay and work with good people and work on a good mission. And this one came together, and kind of the stars aligned. And I thought, let's give this one a shot. I just thought, seeing the background, the science, the mechanism of action being studied so thoroughly by Dr. Dunn and his team, that I saw such great core, such great structure to this, that I saw it could succeed, and I think it can succeed. And so I was happy to take this one on. And yes, there's a huge impact, and we're working with an underserved patient population. And again, being a father and being a family man, seeing what this can do for patients and their family and caregivers, I was just motivated to do it.
Do your kids understand what you do?
I think they do. Yeah, but my son now, he's junior in high school, and he's getting into engineering and thinking about things. And I tell him some stories from work, and the kids listen up. My daughter also, she's in eighth grade, and she's intrigued by it. I think they're curious. I don't know if they know exactly what I do, but I
Yeah,
think
I
they,
always find that a bit entertaining, like asking the kids, or what does your mom or dad do? And their response sometimes is so far out in left field, but you'd be shocked. There are some kids that are so on point with they know exactly what their parents do. It's just interesting. Um, but I think you're giving them probably one of the best life lessons that there is, personally and professionally, is the understanding of delayed gratification. This is not going to happen overnight. You don't work hard for a month and you get FDA approval. And I think there's something incredibly um, just durable about you and about this company. So let's chat about that a bit. I mean, you're 4 years in. Dr. Dunn obviously is 24 years in, but the headwinds and the things that you deal with early on, and now you have to start thinking about reimbursement and continued investment and all these other pieces that come into play later on in the life cycle. So I am curious about the endurance that's needed from beginning to now, because it doesn't get less. It only gets more if you have some success.
yeah, it is. There's a long play here. It's not a short. And like you're saying, kind of, the kids and what they see, I think they do see and understand that it is a hard work. There is a long path, but there's rewards, and there's rewards as you go too. And it's not just, beginning and then end. There's milestones and things you achieve as you get through this process. And to focus on those, I think milestones and achievements is key. You got to have something that's sort of attainable in the near future, but again, have the bigger picture, which is longer down the road, and using those, as daily motivation to get up every day and get out there and do it. I think is important, and it has been a long run. I think looking back at the trials and tribulations, if you would, of early stage. We started this company, really back in the beginning of 2019. And so, things were going great, and we got into 2020 and COVID shutdown happened, right? And all of a sudden our plans had to turn and things got pushed out and put on hold. And so we had to, reconfigure and refigure it out and kind of find a new path to get forward. And, all along it's just it's tough going too, because no one has ever done this before. So even when we're dealing with, the FDA and even clinicians, and there's no predicate, there's no oh, this has been done before and it looks similar. It's, well, no, I've never seen this before. Let's, there's a level of caution that goes along on all levels too. So yeah, a lot of heavy lifting, but I think the rewards as we go and achieve these milestones, for example, getting into the clinic and treating the first human ever, I think is just hugely motivating. And so it does push us along, but a lot of work to do. Obviously we are have a lot ahead of us. We're a small team, so we're kind of I like to say lean and mean. But again, we're being capital efficient and trying to advance a new technology here in this new economic environment that we're in, which is not very conducive to early stage medical device right now. So
No.
trying to weather the storm right now.
Yep. So one of the things that we haven't mentioned, which I think has been an important part of your adventure journey, whatever you want to call it, is the presence of Fogarty and how they've been involved. So would love for you to touch base, because when I visited there, just truly blown away at the collaboration, the facility, just the feel of the place. Everyone seems to want everyone to succeed. Like there didn't seem to be any kind of competition that I could feel. So would love for you to touch base on that, because that's an interesting component that most people probably don't know about.
Yeah, no, the Fogarty Innovation, it's been a great supporter and environment for Eclipse. It was great to have you there the other week, and your presentation was fantastic. But it is a very collaborative and interesting environment. Fogarty Innovation is a not-for-profit organization. They have a beautiful facility at El Camino Hospital in Mountain View. And in there, we have beautiful office space, laboratory space, bench, engineering workshops, machine shops, 3D printing shops, So everything you think of as an early stage medical device company that you might need in a shared environment. And so, we're just one company that exists within there when there's 5 or 6 other full-fledged companies like ourselves. And then on top of that, there's a lot of innovation that goes on with accelerator programs and invention accelerator programs where ideas come in and they can be percolated. Could be a physician that has an idea on a new device for something. They can come into the environment, get support. And that support goes even further than just, facilities and engineers. Andrew Cleland and the team bring a level of a tremendous medical device experience throughout all the facets of the business: regulatory, clinical, engineering, operations, legal, finance, everything that you need to run a business. And then on top of that, having Andrew as kind of the captain of the ship, he's just been phenomenal. It's been great to be there, and the network expands beyond Fogarty. Very close ties and part of connected with Stanford Biodesign. And again, just all the physicians and all the different companies in the Bay Area. We all have it's not even like 2 degrees of separation. It's probably about 1 degree of separation in the neighborhood around here for medical device and innovation.
Yeah, it's funny. People throw the community term around a lot, but in Northern California, it's just different. And I bumped into Josh at MedTech Women, and the first thing he said was, "How come you haven't come to Stanford Biodesign to visit?" After I had just been at Fogarty, everyone seems to look out for each other, and they all want to share information. They want to bring the innovation as forward as quickly and as safely as possible. I don't know any other city in the world, from a healthcare standpoint, that can produce that level of advancement. It's really extraordinary. One of
Yeah,
the
it
th-
is. One of the things that we talked about earlier is just how Eclipse came to be, and not only just the right people in literally the right place. That right place is Northern California, where not only do you have great minds and thinkers, you have great people that can do the work, entrepreneurs, engineers, and access to funding and financing, and it all kind of lives within this network here and makes it it exists elsewhere in the world, elsewhere in the country, of course, but I think the concentration here, and again, that 1 degree of separation, literally, it's a phone call, and you can be talking to the right people to make these things happen and come together. It's really fascinating.
well, what's interesting about it, and it's probably the biggest compliment you can give, is it's not just that it's one phone call; it's that it's returned, and there's action, and they follow through. Like there isn't any. Well, I'll see if I can help you, and then you don't ever hear from them again. It's hang on a second, and let me text them now, because I've seen it at the conferences, things I'm at. I mean, it happens real time that
Yeah.
they're dropping everything because you've called or because someone introduced you. It's truly amazing how much there is this we kind of mentality, which is just, I don't know. I'm sure other industries have it. I've only been in medtech, so I don't know how the others do it, but it's extraordinary, and it's all for patients. So one of
It
the
is.
things that I would love for you to give some insight on is I'm a big believer that the reason that people try to start up a company is because somebody before them had some success. And if you were talking to somebody who you met at an event or what have you, and like, wow, I have this idea, or this physician came to you with an idea, I'm curious what you say to those people. How do you explain to them, look, there is a pathway for success for everyone. And here's what I went through, but here's what you can do. Because I think people need to hear that it's possible.
Yeah, there's I do get approached by innovators and entrepreneurs at all different stages. From the real early on, let's say, young engineer or physician that has an idea about how do you do it, how do you create a company, how do you spin, or somebody later on that wants to be an entrepreneur and lead a company. I think the first bit of advice I typically give, especially maybe the younger guys coming out, is get some experience, spend some time working for a bigger company learn about medical device and what it takes, learn about all the different facets of the business. I think that's something that I did early on in my career. Didn't know it at the time, but I ended up doing that, is get in on a great company with great management to learn everything, go learn about, finance, quality, regulatory, clinicals, get out into the field and work with sales reps in the operating room and, just absorb everything you can, because that allows, you to understand what it's going to take to build a company, and so I kind of feel through my career, I've kind of taken those steps. I've been able to take advantage of opportunities and companies and situations where I could get those life experiences that then allow me to operate on my own now as the CEO and founder of this company. Not to say that I know everything, but I've got a little bit of experience in each of these areas. So I kind of feel I can be a contributor and lead in these areas. And so I think getting experience is a critical one. And I think perseverance is another one, where, you're going to hit major headwinds. I mean, there's going to be highs and lows. And, I tell people too, if you're not, you don't want to go through those, or you don't have the stomach for it, then don't do this. You got to be able to kind of get through some dark days and be able to be creative and innovative and figure out ways to move forward, because it's going to be tough. That's another aspect of early stage startups. And I think also just telling innovators and entrepreneurs to think it through the entirety of it. Think about all aspects of it. Think about, go further on down the line with an idea and think about reimbursement. What kind of clinical data you're going to need to succeed? How are you going to get, traction, business traction? Because you may have a great idea, but to go from, the very beginning to, what's the end? You got to know sort of what's going to happen at the end. That's another avenue I think early stage entrepreneurs and inventors need to spend a little time on before they embark on one of these journeys.
Yeah, I would add that what you're saying is universal. This is what you're going to experience. And the one thing that's a common thread in all of that is ask for help. You don't have to do it all by yourself. No one gives you a special award because you did it on your own. I remember when my wife was having our kids and they were saying about epidurals. I'm like, you don't get a special ribbon after you give birth because you did or did not have an epidural. Just have a safe experience with this. And the same thing with this. You don't. I don't know why people sometimes have a tendency to feel like I have to do this on my own. And sometimes that happens. And I don't know if it's just a matter of fear or they're embarrassed or they don't know who to call. But man, there is a community, and I use that word heavily. There's a community out there that wants to help you. Well, look, I have had an education here. This is every bit as impressive as I thought it would be. Is there anything that we've left off, Andre, that we should make sure we cover for the technology, for the indication, for your company?
I don't think so. No, I think we covered a lot today. I think, our mission, vision, and values, I think, are out to make a difference. Our goal as a company right now is to execute and deliver on our milestones. We're gearing up for a fundraising round next year and excited to bring our story to the investment world and to the greater environment, and look forward to conveying that story and showing what we've done and being getting more clinical success is what we're looking forward to do.
That's terrific. Well, this has been Andre Bessette, the CEO of Eclipse Regenesis. It is a life-saving, life-changing, and as impactful as any device from an infant standpoint that you could imagine. And I'm just grateful that he has been able to find something that he can sink his teeth into, because look what you've done with it. It's a really extraordinary effort. So thanks so much for being on, and I look forward to seeing you continue to succeed.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.